In the final part, my investigation takes me beyond the traditional list of the 12 disciples to see how the church deliberately excluded some of Jesus' original followers, and also to find out the real significance of these 12 people, why they are still so important for the world, and how anyone can become a disciple. My journey to uncover the secrets of the 12 disciples is now almost complete. I have already investigated the church's disputed claim that Peter came to Rome and how it gave the papacy its power. How a legend was created to miraculously transport James from Palestine to Spain to help the church defeat Islam. Of John, who lent his name to one of the most controversial books of the Bible, but almost certainly didn't write it. Of Thomas, whose epic journey to the East has been dismissed by scholars in the West. Of the 3 mystery disciples whose real identities remained hidden because they were Jesus' brothers and too Jewish for the later church. And of Judas, whose evil treachery derived from the mistranslation of a single Greek word. And then, of course, there is the most important disciple of all, the one who has had the biggest impact on the Christianity we know today, and the man most responsible for the way we now understand the events surrounding the Last Supper, even though he wasn't there, the Apostle Paul. But are these the only disciples? Surely there is a glaring omission, one that has a direct bearing on how the church is governed today. Something that still causes division and bitter conflict throughout the Christian world. The complete lack of any female disciples. If there had been even one, there would be no debate today about women priests, bishops, and even the possibility of a female pope. Finished writing his letter to the Romans here in Corinth, he needed someone who was trustworthy, reliable, and with sufficient authority to deliver it to the Christian community in Rome. So who did he choose? A leader of the church in Corinth, someone he describes in the letter as a patron, a deacon, a serving minister within the church. But this wasn't a man, it was a woman called Phoebe. A few miles away from Corinth are the remains of an ancient Roman port. 40 years ago, the sunken ruins of a 4th century church were discovered here. Some believe it was dedicated to Phoebe.
Phoebe was probably a wealthy woman because St. Paul calls her a benefactor or patroness, prostatis in the Greek. So she was a woman of some eminence possibly and substance.
What does this powerful story of Phoebe mean to women in the church today? What does it say?
It says to me that women were a part of the hierarchy, they were a part of the community, they were vital for its spread and its growth, and those possibilities are all available today. The image of God, which St. Paul says we are called to show forth, is not male. The image of God is not female. The image of God is male and female. The two become one flesh. I mean, hey, inconceivable that you could have a single-sex kingdom of God.
Phoebe is not the only powerful woman in the story of the early church. In fact, the New Testament is full of them. There is, of course, Mary, Jesus' mother, and Mary Magdalene, one of his most famous followers. But there is also Joanna, Susanna, Priscilla, Tryphena, Tryphosa, Persis, and Julia. And then a certain woman called Junia, whom Paul describes as outstanding among the apostles. This title so offended later Christians that they tried to alter it.
No one could imagine that a female could have been called an apostle. So the Junia the woman Junia became Junius, a man. Unfortunately, we have now evidence, textual evidence that indicate that it was originally a woman.
So you're saying that there was an attempt to make Junia masculine in order to hide her feminine nature?
Yes, these women were downplayed. And in my view, this happened because the tradition in the society was not ready to accept these radical changes introduced by early Christianity.
Outside the Bible, there is more evidence for the crucial role played by women in the early church. An early Christian text, written in the 2nd century, describes the life of a young follower of Paul, a woman called Thecla. At Silifke, in modern-day Turkey, there are the remains of a cult centre dedicated to her memory. A local historian, Silal Taskaran, agreed to show me the underground church.
Saint Thecla is the student of Saint Paul. She was a young girl and she was going to be married. But after have heard the speech of Saint Paul, she decided to be Christian.
According to her story, Thecla gave up everything and followed Paul all over Asia Minor as he preached the new Christian faith. She was pursued by her angry parents who wanted her back, and several times she was arrested and even faced death. She found refuge in this cave, where at the end of her life she is believed to have miraculously disappeared. That's the site of a miracle.
Yes,
in
miracle.
there. So people would have the windows here so they could see the place where the miracle took place.
That's right.
Later Christians built a huge complex in Thecla's memory. The original basilica was over 80 meters long. At the time, it was one of the biggest churches in the world and attracted thousands of pilgrims.
Christianity has taught, not by Jesus Christ himself, but by his apostles, 12 apostles, especially by his St. Paul, But they were all men. But as women, we find only Thecla as a teacher for the new faith.
Thecla's story shows how in the early church women could be teachers and evangelists in their own right. Paul describes Thecla as the apostle equal to the other apostles, a rare and significant title, particularly as she was a woman. All of this is more proof that powerful female figures like Thecla existed in the early church, and that these women too should be counted amongst Jesus' disciples. At the cave of St. Paul in Ephesus, there is some extraordinary visual evidence that illustrates the negative attitude of the later church fathers to women. Next to the ancient image of Paul, there is another painting of Thecla. Both of these paintings are roughly the same size, and both have their right hand raised in the classic Christian gesture of the teacher. So in the mind of the original artist, both Paul and Thecla had equal authority, a confirmation of the early church's sexual equality. But both of Thecla's eyes and her right hand have been scratched out. Originally it was thought that this had been done by Muslims, but if it had been, Paul would have been damaged too. It's now thought that this was the handiwork of later Christians, who were so unhappy with the idea that Paul, a man, would share his authority with a woman. It seems even Paul, the most powerful of all the disciples, was subject to the will of the later church. The radical message he inherited from Jesus was in turn watered down by his later followers.